I made Link's glowing arm from Tears of the Kingdom in real life, but I didn't want to stop just there, because I wanted to try to take his abilities from the game and make them real as well. So will I succeed, or will everything fall apart on me? For those of you who don't know, in Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Link receives an arm from a goat god. It's a whole thing. And this arm has a bunch of new powers. In my last Zelda video showing off the Zonai shield, I actually did a little bit of Ultrahand levitation, but I have a confession. This was all in After Effects. I know, I would feel betrayed too. But after that video, I was motivated to try and make a real-life Ultrahand arm. Not only did I want to make it glow like in the games, but I also want to see how close I can make these abilities in real life. Well, at least within the confines of my own apartment. You could kind of call this Make It Real, Budget Edition. Oh, and why am I wearing this? Well, I don't exactly look like Link, do I? So I went with everybody's favorite NPC, Chemo! Everyone knows Chemo, right? He reads a paper. No? Okay. Anyways, the first thing I'm gonna have to do is make the arm itself. First, I bought this gauntlet model from Crotech Inc. and printed it out with this copper filament. That part was easy. The more difficult part was getting the gauntlet to glow green, and getting my hand to turn from black to blue. For the green glow, I first thought of using electroluminescent wire like I did for my Zonai shield, but it's too thick and not flexible enough. Eventually, I stumbled upon laser wire, which was more flexible and a lot thinner. The only issue is it's a lot more expensive. And here's the other issue with laser wire. Although it's pretty bendable, it does snap after a certain point. I actually have multiple gauntlets that have been completely ruined by a quick snap. But eventually I realized that it was the super glue that was making it extra brittle. So for my final gauntlet, I used as little amount of super glue as possible, then slathered everything down with a more flexible clear glue. It's not perfect, but I think this should get me through at least this video. And when you plug it in, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. On top of that, making a black arm glow blue had its own host of challenges. I looked into every and any option, from electric glowing paint to electroluminescent threads. But not only would this make the arm not black, it was also ridiculously expensive. Eventually, I started thinking about how when Link uses an ability, the world around him kind of changes, as if the environment is influenced by his arm. So I pivoted to the idea of making a glove that reacts to UV light instead. Unfortunately, black tends to absorb all light, including ultraviolet. So I had to do some experimenting. Here we have UV spray, UV ink, which uses the Halo logo for some reason, and UV powder. And even though my hand coated in the UV ink was the clear winner, the results seemed to favor the UV spray, so after multiple coats, well, it looks better than no UV treatment at all. And I do have to say, after putting everything together, it was worth all the struggles. Now, let's make this arm do more than just be pretty to look at. From the ability wheel within the game, there are 8 selections to choose from, but only 5 of them are real abilities that relate to the arm. Ultrahand, Fuse, Ascend, Recall, and Autobuild. Let's start with the ability I had a cool idea for, but couldn't quite execute in the way I would have liked. Ascend. In Tears of the Kingdom, Ascend essentially allows Link to jump up and swim through solids to get to greater heights. In real life, that's physically impossible, but if I had the budget and the warehouse of, let's say, a Hacksmith Industries, this is basically what I do. So here's my idea. Here's me and a platform that's right above me. Strap me to some wires, lift me up through the bottom, and both the bottom and the top would have these aperture-like entrances that allow for passage one way, and safe to land on after I pass through. But again, I don't have the resources for that. So what was my alternative idea? Wow, I'm so much higher now. I really ascended. And I know what's going through your mind right now. Is that the best he could actually do? With my resources and budget? Yeah. But hey, Hacksmith crew, we both made a Zonai shield video last year, so if you're ever thinking about making my first idea real, I'm just one email away. Yeah, that's never gonna happen, is it? But what this did allow me to do is showcase the power of today's sponsor. Whoa, slow down there, partner. Before you skip the sponsor, I just want to let you know that there's actually another Zelda project within the advertisement. Just thought you should know that, okay? Okay, bye. Flexispot. So for those out of the loop, I'm actually moving shop so I can finally have a dedicated room for projects and videos. And thankfully, Flexispot has stepped in to help with their E7 Plus. I actually just bought a walking treadmill, and the only way I can possibly use it at my desk is if I move it high enough to keep on working while I walk. The PC's coming later. Thankfully, it's also really simple to assemble with their easy to follow instructions. And when you're finished, man, is it nice to look at. And not only is it nice, as we saw earlier, it can lift all the way up to 440 pounds. And check how sturdy it is. I'm printing a Zelda project right now at ludicrous speed. And is the desk moving? No, not even a bit. Oh, and what Zelda project might this be? Well, if we place this thing here and plug it into the USB port on the Flexispot, bam! Look familiar? Now, if you're interested in a Flexispot desk, you're in luck because you can save on any budget with their brand day deal. Need a rock solid desk? E7 Plus. A premium daily desk? You go with the E7 Pro. Limited budget? Can't go wrong with the E5. And if you use my exclusive bonus code 24BDYTB50 for $50 off between May 20th and 26th. The link is in the description. Well, I hope you enjoyed that Zelda hologram build, but now it's time to move on to Ultrahand. Ultrahand is the first ability you get in the game and allows you to move objects around and attach basically anything together. Now, while I don't exactly have the budget or the space to set up an elaborate tracking system with pulleys and wires to move objects in the air, I do have a fun idea. I want to control Ultrahand in the game with my own hand. And let me tell you, this got complicated. Not only did I want to control Link's hand with my own hand, I wanted it to be on the actual Switch hardware. And I wanted the lights in the room to toggle when it's all activated. Oh, and I still want to be able to move around with Link, so I need Joy-Con controls for my left hand. So what was my solution to make all of this happen? This mess. How did we get here? Well, this project has been worked on and shelved multiple times in the past 7 months, and the last time I was working on it was in December, where I haphazardly showed it off for a local news story. And now I have to remember how everything's wired. And while I figure that out, let me speedrun explaining how this all works. First, I hover my hand over the sensor that's specifically made for hand tracking. It sends that data to my PC where it's processed in a Unity program, and if it senses my right hand, I have that alert my Python script that tells an Arduino to flip these 2 relays, one that lights up the lasers in my hand and the other that turns the UV light on. While this is happening, I also have the Unity script translating the hand motions into a virtual Xbox 360 controller, which feeds into Read WASD and combines that virtual controller with inputs from my Joy-Con to create a second virtual 360 controller, which is read by G-Tuner so that I can translate that into my Titan 1 device that is plugged into my Switch and pretends it's a Pro controller. Pretty simple stuff. But if you think there's a simpler way to do this, I'd love to hear it in the comments. But keep in mind you have to solve the challenge of having a Joy-Con and a virtual controller feed into the Switch. So, there's that. Okay, while I blabbed about, I think I got things working. Alright, so you can still walk around normally with the left Joy-Con, but when you hover your right hand over the sensor, it activates your Ultrahand ability. And you can hover your hand up, down, left, or right to control the positioning. Making a fist will make Ultrahand try to grab an object. And while you have an object, you can push or pull it by making a stop gesture and moving your hand back and forth. And to rotate an object, you first point out a single finger and flick that up, down, left, or right. It's a bit of a complicated schema, but it's a bit complicated in the game as well. Now, let's see if I can try to beat the Ultrahand tutorial shrine. One little issue I noticed is that it's almost impossible to detach items since it requires some quick stick flicks. I somehow managed to do it once, but never again. So I had to use a certain other ability to help me get across, but I still call this a success. Okay, that's 2 down and 3 to go. Let's move on to Fuse. In the game, Fuse allows you to, well, fuse basically anything to your equipment. Pretty straightforward. And typically, one of the very first things you fuse with in the game is a rock to a stick. So I printed out a replica of the thick stick that many moblins carry in the game. And I also printed out and painted this rock that has a stainless steel disc inside it. And inside the stick is this mechanism. It should be able to hold up the rock using a strong electromagnetic pull. And using this Bluetooth module, I should also be able to control it wirelessly as well. So, as you can see, when it's not activated, the stick isn't attaching itself to the steel plate in the rock. So let's see if the electromagnet is strong enough to make this fusion work. It's sticking. Oh, this is really cool and very strong, honestly. I'm surprised and impressed. This is keeping up. Back off. I have a stone! Just one thing though. Make sure you remember where the hand sensor is at all times. Uh-oh. I'll fix that later. But for now, let's move on to Autobuild. Autobuild is technically optional within the game, but it's super useful because it pulls up a menu of your past Ultrahand contraptions and automatically builds it for you. In real life, I have a system that I actually use that basically does the same thing. Okay, this was pretty simple. I just pulled up a menu of my past projects, shared that screen with my phone, and controlled everything with Ultra Leap's built-in mouse program. Easy peasy. And after cleaning it up, I have a pretty dang good replica of the infamous hover bike so many players use to get around Hyrule. The only issue is that even though Link can easily hop on his Autobuild, I unfortunately cannot. But now it's time for the final ability, Recall. Recall allows you to rewind time on any object in the game, and it's both a really cool and useful ability. For this project, however, we're just going to limit ourselves to ground-based movement. So let's take this car I made in the game, drive it around for a bit, and reverse that. Now here's an Arduino card I made in real life. I have it connected via Bluetooth to this app I made, which lets me drive it around. And if the car works how I programmed it, when I'm done driving, I activate Recall, and it should remember all of the driving inputs and then reverse them. So, does it work? Kind of. My code seems to be right, but for whatever reason, sometimes the wheels need to be bumped before they actually get going, and that can cause some issues. I think the idea was great, but I don't know if it's the motors being terrible or if it's an electrical issue, but what I do know is I want to get these problems fixed before OPENSUS.
Oh, and I hear you now asking, what's OPENSUS? Well, it just so happened to be the place where I legally acquired this poster. And is also the brainchild of the mad scientist turned YouTuber, William Osmond.
It's a convention taking place in San Francisco this June, and there's going to be a bunch of science YouTubers and exhibitors showcasing some crazy projects. Like this Etch-a-Sketch that can automatically resketch photos. Or like a billion DSs hooked up to one device for shiny hunting. And don't forget, Big Furby. I'll be there once again this year to show off Ultrahand, Fuse, and hopefully an improved Recall robot. Last year, I somehow hauled my big 3DS all the way over to San Fran, and a bunch of cool people stopped by my booth, including Jack's Films.
Very, very normal and legal things going on here.
Very normal and legal. Oh yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
All on the yeah.
Hoping to get that video off to the patrons by the end of next week. Oh, and speaking of patrons, special thanks to the executive level patrons. Jameson Zabalos, Don Necco, Sally and Dave, Pow Pow, Injured Dog, Harley Jean, Zebramang, Grandma Watson, Jimmers, Evan Timmerman, and Marco Carini.